And I want to thank you all for joining us today. We are super excited having the room to hear Dr. Yates. We hope you like the card, your picture of what your career path can and may look like. On your near your seats, you should see a note card with pen. That is for any questions during the talk. We'll pick those up periodically once they're completed. So I want to take a couple minutes to thank our partners, Pencil, partnering with us on this event to ensure that Metro Nashville Public School students have access. Brittany Edmondson and Fulcon High School are sending two over their best and brightest to join us today. Dr. Ben Park, Director of the Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center. Dr. Park, would you like to say anything?
Sure. Do you want me to stand? Or
Yeah.
I like to make the joke at this height. I always say I am standing. Well, thanks all for being here. I'm, as you heard, Ben Park. I'm the new director of the Cancer Center at Vanderbilt Ingram. I just started this job July 1st, 2022. And I'm really pleased and excited to be here. This is really something that is near and dear to my heart. I feel like we're always in the business of trying to increase not only diversity, but also excite the mind and passion about science, cancer research, and everything we do in all aspects of that. I was at Johns Hopkins for 20 years and prior to this job, prior to coming to Vanderbilt, and we had similar types of programs, but it's so exciting to see all the faces here and the excitement of getting people interested in science and cancer research and what we do. So part of that is I welcome anyone if you want to talk with me. I'm easily findable on the web. By email, just email and directly ping me. If you can't find it, Karen, probably you can blend it out. But welcome again. Thanks again for being here, and thanks for inviting me.
And then final thanks to the MBA team and our science director, Dr. Karen. And obviously Dr. Clayton Yates for being here to share your journey. So I'd like to welcome Christopher Smith.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Smith. I'm the program manager for community engagement here at the Meharry Vanderbilt Alliance, and I have the pleasure of introducing our guest today. I'm just going to read a quick bio and then he'll come up to share with us. So, Dr. Clayton Yates is an internationally recognized expert in prostate cancer health disparities research, cell biology, molecular biology, and molecular pathology. Dr. Yates earned his PhD from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, Department of Pathology in 2005, as well as a certificate of training in tissue engineering and regenerative medicine from the McGowan Institute of Regenerative Medicine. He then went on to complete a postdoctoral fellowship at Emory University School of Medicine, Department of Urology. After completing his postdoctoral training in 2007, Dr. Yates accepted a tenure-track assistant professor position at the historic Tuskegee University in the Department of Biology and Center for Cancer Research. Dr. Yates was promoted to associate professor in 2010 and full professor in 2014, where he served until his recent transition to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Dr. Yates has spoken at over 35 universities and conferences, received numerous research honors and awards, authored over 65 peer-reviewed publications, and received numerous Department of Defense and R-level National Institution of Health grants in prostate and breast cancer health disparities, totaling over $25 million in extramural funding. Dr. Yates currently serves as the John R. Lewis Endowed Professor of Pathology at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Please help me welcome Dr. Clayton Yates.
So I just sit, do whatever, stand. What should I do?
It's up to you.
It's up to me?
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for that introduction. It's very humbling to sort of hear the journey, but I think just to sort of start off, this can be more of a conversation. You know, you heard my journey in different transitions. Throughout those transitions, though, what I've always tried to do is one, stay true to myself, who I am, where I came from. He didn't read this part about it, but I came from Atlanta, Georgia, Decatur. Okay, Southwest DeKalb High School, if anybody know Atlanta. So, and then when I'm finishing and going to Tuskegee and the HBCU, I've always been able to, or try to keep the mission of what my roots are, who my family is, throughout all those places. And that's guided me through now even to Johns Hopkins. And so, maybe we could start to have some, maybe conversations about, what's kind of on your mind. And maybe you could ask me questions if you want to ask. Yeah, let's get into the questions.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Wilson. I'm the executive director here. He don't know this, but I'm about to grill him, so that's okay.
Okay, come on. Let me get my water. Got a sweat towel or something?
So, I think one of the things that I love about having someone of your caliber is that I think you like to minimize like what it took to get there, right? And so tell me this, all right, grew up in Atlanta, Decatur area, right? So what sparked your interest in science?
That's a good question. So as a young kid, I always wanted to be a doctor, a pediatrician. I just told my mom I wanted to be a pediatrician. And I had the opportunity at 15 years old. My uncle ended up marrying the CEO of West End Medical Centers in Atlanta. I guess a little privilege. And I was working at Pizza Hut at the time. my family said, "You're gonna work in our house, okay?" And the Pizza Hut actually got robbed, and I was in there. And then my mom came up there. She said, "My baby quits today." And they went through the family, and then they said he's a good kid. And it got to my uncle, and then they offered me a job at West End Medical Centers at 15 years old. So I started in human resources in a healthcare facility. It's a 7 clinic healthcare facility in Atlanta on the West End side, and worked there all the way up until decided to go to Pittsburgh every summer, being groomed by a phenomenal group of physicians, human resources, because now I'm the boss's nephew. So a lot of people poured into helping shape and mold. And then I also decided I wanted to be in research throughout that process.
So talk about that transition, because you originally wanted to be a physician, a pediatrician. Was it what you see? Like, tell me what it was that said, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to do this instead. Or was it more like, wow, this is much more interesting? Talk about that transition.
Right. So, I was at Tuskegee, right? They say, oh, if you want to get in medical school, you need to volunteer and do some research, right? That's what they tell you to do. All right. So I got into the lab, Professor Tim Richard Turner then, and I was working. And I was really liking this lab because, see, so first thing is a little bit about me is I don't really like the rules. Okay. I create rules, but I don't really like to follow rules. Okay. I got a lot of trouble as a kid. A lot of trouble. Most of my family didn't think I was going to make it out of high school. So they're really shocked. So just kind of, when I got into this lab situation, I was like, it's free. And I'm working in sort of this corporate America situation, and even though my aunt was the CEO, they held me to task. If I'm there at 8 o'clock, if you're, that there at 8:10, people are like, where are you, right? Even if you worked late the night before. And I'm a hard worker, but at the same time, I was like, well, I like to be free. And then I got in this lab situation. It was just free, and you could work at home a little bit. You could come into the lab. Then we started traveling all over the places. If you get some data, you can go to a meeting, and I love to travel. We talked about how many frequent flyer miles I had last night. So me and my, and so I was like, this life. And so at the time, my PhD advisor's wife is a physician, Rita Harvey Turner. And Rita is just prophetic. So I was at their house one time, and she said, Clay, you're a scientist. She said, you're a scientist. Everything about you is a scientist. And I was like, okay, I am. And like that's it.
It's interesting, though, because it sounds like you have people poured into you in different ways.
Different way, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the school you went to, right? And were there teachers, were there people that influenced you at the high school level? Talk about that.
No, my high school, man, they just trying to keep order. Uh, no, they were just trying to keep order. Yeah, I think, you know, the light bulb again, I think came on in college. Right. Yeah, the kids, Southwest DeKalb's on the west side of Atlanta, predominantly, African American Black institution, high school. And yeah, it was more just keeping order. Yeah, just and I was the class clown. I was creating the unorder. I was one of the ones creating the lack of order. Yeah.
Right? Where literally the teachers are there just trying to kind of make sure nobody's
Right.
not talking about toting down the teachers, right?
Yeah, luckily they had that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think this is important that regardless of your circumstance, right? You can get impacted or influenced in other ways. So when you were 15, then you started working at this hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So that's incredible. Were you afraid?
No, because I like money. So I always wanted to make money. I was going to work. Now, so that was never about. It was just what I was going to work at. Just what I was going to do. But working was not long as I wasn't working in the street. I'm working in the business. Somebody, I was going to work. I really wanted to make a living. I like nice things.
Anyone ever approached you, like, did you ever think about doing both? You know, as an MVP, one of the things that we're always trying to do is increase the pipeline of people considering pathways as what we call community scientists.
Right.
You know, I don't know, maybe that wasn't introduced to you or was later on, you felt like that's not worth doing it.
Yeah, it came later on. That was the sort of when I got to Pittsburgh, and then probably like my second year after I guess I got a mark, and people started seeing me. It's like, oh, you want to have the MD PhD, and by that time I actually had a daughter, was married, and family, and now I needed to finish because my wife needed to start. I was like, no. I was sort of always committed, but no, it wasn't introduced to me early on, and maybe that's why I didn't choose a path. I think it's definitely a viable path.
I say that because I think that's very common where a lot of college students don't even know that that's a thing. Yeah. I didn't know that was a thing until I started also working in the lab because it's the thing you had to do as treatment, like you said.
Yeah.
My story is a little different. I'm educated as well, right? But I actually started out as a basic scientist, right? Howard College undergraduate. And the reason why I did the MD PhD initially so I could understand human disease processes, but I was a single parent. So for me, there was money attached to it during the medical scientist training program. Yeah. So what you don't know is that if you do the MD PhD program, medical scientist training program, not only do you get a stipend, but they pay for medical school. So I was like, oh, free ride. I can work hard too. Yeah. Someone's gonna pay, right? It wasn't about me liking nice things over the but it was a means to an end doing the medical science training program. So that's the reason why I did it. And it turns out that I actually enjoyed clinical medicine more so than the lab, which is interesting. So yeah. And don't forget, so if anybody, if you have questions all along, because otherwise I'll keep peppering. Yes, Brittany.
Hi, hello.
How you doing?
Here. I'm our high school student.
Good.
In the health science field. And one thing that, and I don't know what it's looking like at other schools, but this idea of research and what that looks like, especially for these young people, where it's not been something that is explored as deeply as you're talking about, and I guess like finding a path of interest, in research and what it can look like for them, even if they're not doing it with fidelity in their science and math classes. So they do have health labs and medical assistant classes, but that research component is something that we continue to try to figure out, like what does that look like for the students.
I think that's a really important concept, and I'll even start with, and I wish I would have brought. I have a T-shirt that says "Points Up" and said, "This is what a scientist looks like." Right? Because sometimes we have this sort of idea of a scientist is a gray-haired dude in the lab with a lab coat and just kind of weird scientist or mad scientist kind of thing. Let's be honest, and and everyone here who's running a lab, the last time I've been in a lab for real, literally have I been in the lab? It has been 15 years. right? So, you know, what I was sold into was a career of ideas, okay? A career of continuously developing ideas. I have with lots of people in my lab who do experiments all the time, and they're going on now to be trained, and they have their own labs, and they're doing replicating what we do. But from our job as a leader of a laboratory, my job is to generate ideas and then come out and speak to like this. So I do spend a lot of my time more on I like to call my postdoc mentor told me, he says, you guys are scientists, right? I'm a politician. That's what he would tell me all the time. Leland Chung, he's a very famous scientist. He trained. He said, I'm a politician. And so we do more politicking, raising money, sparking ideas, traveling to institutions, being inspired, and then bringing that back to our lab for new ideas, then more of the actual work. So that's only a brief part of your training. So once you get through that part and you become the professor, you're more in control of the whole process. So that's just, being in the test tube in the lab, that's just a small little part. And if you're really great, even when I was in graduate school, and a lot of people don't know this, and some mentors won't like it, but I had a great mentor. I was he let me do kind of the way I wanted to do. So I never really enjoyed the lab part that much either. So when I was a graduate student, I had a team of undergraduates doing all the experiments.
Wow.
Then they would report the data to me. Then I go into the boss and then report the data to him. He was okay with it.
I was gonna say, sometimes you're not able to do that nowadays, because unfortunately there are regulations now about having high schoolers doing.
No, undergraduates.
Oh,
You have undergraduates. You have undergraduates in the lab.
Oh,
You have a undergraduate student take on.
wow. I like that.
So yeah. So the first idea I think was probably spun everything else was that when I was in training and I started off doing prostate cancer, we do many other cancer types now. We would write the first two sentences. We would say prostate cancer affects men. African American men get the disease 60% more and die twice is likely to pass from the disease. And then we would go on and write the paper and do something else. And no one else was really trying to figure out why that stats were they were. And so early on in my career, it's actually why I ended up at Tuskegee, because I did think about some other places and people didn't think I would have a viable career, was that there has to be more to that stats than just access. There has to be some biological contribution to why the disease is more aggressive and African American men are dying. So we came up with this basic hypothesis of this epigenetic and now genomics and everything that had sort of surrounded very early on that there was a biological basis of disease. And we published some of the first articles showing that early on, and that sort of sparked my career from there, and now into therapeutics and so forth as well.
You mentioned two big words, genomics and epigenetics. Can you just give descriptors of
What that is?
Yeah.
So I'm sure we all heard the term DNA, right? And so the DNA in your body is sort of this long sequence, and it's coding for all the things that happen functionally for us to, our skin color, our hair color, who we are, our organs, and so forth as well. What genomics now is the ability, we can read that. We can actually start to understand what that code is. It was a code that we didn't understand before, and now with this advent of genome sequencing, we can actually understand what that code is and then understand what the code is doing in certain genes that are turned on and off, right? That make up what's kind of happening physiologically in our body. And then the term epigenetics is, okay, we have that code, but it's happening outside of the code. So it's just happening spontaneously, right? Sort of de novo changes the gene and not actually changing the actual DNA itself. So genomics or genes is the groundwork we were given, mother, father, right? Passed on. And then epigenetics is what's happening despite the changes in the DNA.
One of the ways I like to think about epigenetics too is the things that happen to the DNA that change, how it actually is read out. And I think one of the reasons why that's important for your conversation and for prostate cancer is because there's a lot of trauma in the Black community that
Yeah.
call it,
Yeah.
right? Are you seeing that in your work?
So yeah, we see a little bit of both in breast and prostate and breast and prostate cancer. We actually just published a really big paper last fall showing how we can start to tease out what are the contributors to what we call epigenetic, which will be social determinants, and what will be genomic by using a person's ancestry, where they came from. Using the ancestry to find genes, we can start to say these were the genes that were passed down from mother and father. These things that are happening, we see the changes, we see the outcome, but that has nothing to do with the actual DNA. That's something that's probably more social and epigenetic regulated. So we're starting to pull those apart so we can attack them.
So,
Tell us your name.
oh, sorry, I'm Carl Britton. I'm a graduate student, PhD student at Meharry. And so,
Congratulations.
and so, I wanted to ask this, essentially, what is it that influenced your career trajectory once you, like your decision on wanting to go into this avenue of research, and then also knowing what direction you want to go into in terms of like research, hospital versus industry, or anything else?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
How the biggest impact?
So that was a tough question too. So I'll tell you. So I told you the vanilla story, right? So we're getting down into. So I told you the nice vanilla. Okay, now really, when it was time to do the PhD, I still was like, no. So they don't make enough money. Okay, because again, I didn't even want to go to college. At the time, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I tell all the time I was going to start with car wash and laundromat and then work my way up from there. But I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I did not even want to go to college. I said, it's a waste of time. I need to start making money now. My mom said, no, you're going to school. Okay, so, so now I'm still finishing up undergrad and kind of thinking about a master's degree and whether I want to commit to this PhD or not. And I was still like, oh, I don't see it. And then again, this guy, Tim Turner, came on my desk. I came into the office one morning and he had an article posted. MD and PhDs get MBAs and become biotech executives. I said, what? I said, oh. So what do you mean? So you mean I could be, there's a whole industry around that? Because again, the picture is just being in the lab, right? But now we got to think about pharma and our drugs and that industry. But that's actually, I never made the connection. That's actually the lab, right? And that comes from the lab. I was like, oh, that's how it's connected. And then I was like, okay, I can do this. And so then, again, when I went to school, didn't plan on getting the MD. I was going to do a PhD MBA. And again, because of family reasons, my wife at the time said, "You're getting a PhD. I need help with the kids." She needed to go back and finish her degree, which she did. And you're going to take care of this daughter, who's now a second-year law student. Yeah, so I didn't get to finish the MBA, but I never forgot that. And now when I started my lab, I started focusing on developing products, not just discovery. And I've spun 2 companies off. Yeah, they're doing very well, both of them.
You want to talk a little bit more about that? I'm sure that's, yeah. We'll talk about your companies.
Yeah, so the first one is I teamed up with a biochemist. So I'm trained in molecular pathology. So we look at tissue, so I don't make drugs, but there's a big number of jobs and probably expertise that have to go into actually forming particularly, let's say, a drug, right? So you have the scientist, the person who's maybe the chemist who can actually come up with it. Now most of our drugs are targeted. So you're gonna need a biologist because most of the chemists don't know what target. They can make these fancy molecules, but they don't know what it goes to. So you need somebody who understands physiology, right? That's kind of where I came in. We should be targeting this, okay? And then you need to know the mechanism and all of these things. So you have to know the cell biology. And again, you can do this in academia or industry. Industry pays a little more. Okay, but we can talk about it, but it's not as secure. People get laid off, so you have some security by academia versus industry. And so and then once you now have a drug and you say, oh, this is great, and we think you're going to cure disease, then you got to go through regulatory. Okay, so now you have these regulatory experts that you have to come in and people who understand how to communicate with the FDA. Okay, it's another skill set that I'm actually learning now as we're finally going through our first IND. And so again, it's this skill sets again, all with a base science background that I never thought existed. That people have now carved out niches and careers for them. So what we developed, what we came to find because of our work, was that African Americans appear to have a dysregulated immune response to disease. And we think that some of the evolutionary conserved environments in Africa where the major infection was malaria, right? So people who couldn't survive, malaria or infectious disease, those genes didn't get passed on. So now you fast forward to today, you take those folks and put them in an environment here in the West, right? And then you have cancer, which is actually less prevalent in Africa than it is here. And you start having these environmental issues along with the epigenetic social. And when the person gets cancer, that immune system again goes kind of wacky. Okay. And so through our discoveries, what I found was that there is a cell type called a macrophage that seems to be orchestrating this immune response. And we found a receptor and then we target it and we made a drug to it. And we sold it. Not cheap. Nice to meet you.
You mentioned when you were younger, and your family even helped you get that Western job. Was there ever a pressure to stay in that box?
Yeah. So right when then, I remember the decision. So I was sitting I had graduated. So this is real life, right? So I graduated undergraduate, and I was deciding whether I wanted to go to graduate school or not. And I had a family now. Okay. And I stayed at that job. They had offered me to be the office manager at one of the facilities. And the goal was going to be, become an office manager and run that facility or go back to graduate school and get this PhD. And I remember sitting in the break room and one of the physicians, his name was Nathaniel Johnson. He came in, the black guy, an OBGYN. And he was like, "Hey, what's going on?" He had known me for a while. So I'm counting down and I'm mulling over this decision. He said, "Well, Clayton, I'm going to tell you this." He said, "I went to medical school after having 6 kids before you started medical school." So he said, and so he turned to me, he said, a kid or a family should not stop your dream. If that's your dream, then you should go for it. And then I didn't look back. I haven't looked back since. I remember now, Nathaniel Johnson. He came to me in the break room. Yep. And so I said, I made that cleared it up for me. And I said, no, I'm going back. So I quit that job, going to Pittsburgh, and then that's why I'm here. Nice. Hi, Brittany.
So I'm in the public health in a particular position where I have a family. Practice always been to go in the time now possibly being kids. I love clinical. I do have a research background, but I guess my question to you is, how did you kind of navigate that space where you went to school with having children? Because I think my challenge is that I am the nurturer, the mom, and dad is, the entrepreneur and trying to manage together.
Yeah. So one, it was a lot of family pressure because even when I was a master, people thought I was my whole family. Oh, you're gonna be a professional student. You need to get a job. Okay. Oh man, I heard that so many times. Right. So really, I guess early on, my wife for the first 2.5 years, she was the caregiver, and that's what I was told. After that, that's when she told me. I don't know how we navigated, but she told me because I was going to do this MBA now. So now I was like, oh, I finished my first class. I'm going to be, she said, no, I'm going to school. You're going to take care of this. So I became full-time dad. And yeah, I put my entrepreneurship off a little bit. It came much later after I got my own lab and so forth, but I never lost the dream. But I did have to put it off about 5 or 6 years, yeah, maybe 7, 8 years now.
Tug as a parent and a mom. That's for the family, or do I pursue what is truly in my spirit? And I've always kept on trying to keep that space. So I graduated undergrad late. Well, not late, but it just took years because of our family. So it's interesting to hear that you kept, that spirit in your mind and you never lost sight of that. So that's something that I struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, when I became the dad, she just had to come with me. I mean, wherever we went to the park, we got to stop by the lab first. I got to change this Western blot. Uh, you know, and they just became a part of the two couples that, I mentioned the one that told me I'm a scientist. They had kids. So Rita and Tim, he started, first he got his PhD at UC Berkeley. And then after they had 3 kids, she went back to medical school at UC Irvine. And so then, the one who told me, Clayton, you're a scientist. And she finished and now she's a physiatrist. So they were like my inspiration. That's why I say like a second family to me. So they were like my inspiration. So yeah, she did it with 3 kids. And Tim, he took care of those kids. And I said, well, Tim did it. I dare do it too. Okay. So, he took care of those kids while she was, had to do her things. And he became a great dad. And sometimes I think as dads, we don't know our potential because I don't say I did this like just completely, just, okay, I'm going to do this. Or, we still a man. Oh, no. But after I got into it, I really owned it. And so my daughter and I became very close.
I'd like to ask a little bit, since we do have public, I see you. Talk a little bit about how your basic science actually is relevant to public health.
You know, I think all of the disciplines, and I think this is even more important nowadays. And we say we're trained in this. In reality, it's all together. So because we're dealing with a person that has multiple things going on at any given time in their life throughout the course of their life, as well as and even management of the disease. So I think all of this is completely related, right? So from a public health perspective, health disparities is a pandemic, right? But do we treat it like that? For real? I mean, right? And so, I just feel like, I work with a lot of public health individuals. I work with a lot of epi people, a lot of population science. And I see also in the public health era, in arena, a lot of people doing a molecular biology. The public health people that I know that are doing training, they do the same thing we do in pathology or genomics. Is not much different. So there's also a facet. Yeah, there's people who just kind of more of the stats, but there's also facet of folks who, one of my really good friends, Stefan Arms at the NCI, he does, both, and he trains a lot of people who have the more of the bigger picture, but then they're diving into the molecular parts of it and then bringing it back out, and so going back and forth between those, and just being very impactful.
So with being on the lab side, do you feel that disconnected in any way from the community population that you're trying to, yes, target in a sense?
I don't. One, because I've spent a great number of times. So when I was the biological center director at Tuskegee, I was in the community quite often. And so, again, that's now encouraged to be out. I actually was just last week back at Tuskegee at NIH, all of us. And it was really interesting because I guess now that I've left Tuskegee, people, were making me, it's all emotional. But the community was actually saying, if Dr. Yates doesn't say it, we're not doing it. Right? So if he doesn't come here, that's why I had to fly back to Tuskegee to bless all of NIH, all of us, because it was like, if he doesn't say we should do this, we're not going to do it, right? So I think it really, again, we put ourselves in these boxes, but we don't have to. And that's what I also loved about the PhD or the terminal degree. I feel I'm a free agent. Don't say that loud to Johns Hopkins, but but I mean, we talk here in the room. I always felt, and my family would tell you that. So when you get a job, I said, "Oh, when I get this PhD, I'm like a free agent, and I'm gonna have this level of expertise that I'm gonna be used in all these areas." And I always saw it as a business, more like a branding than just being in a sort of like a job or just one little area. Mhm.
So I had a question. Do you have any suggestions or advice maybe from transitioning to the bench into, I guess, like data or bioinformatics or genomics research, basically just getting away from the bench and more so getting acquired more with the databases?
Learn R. Learn R. So R is the is the computational base language. They have several other Python, a lot R, but R is the computational language of how we do data science. And I made the transition from my lab. So again, I'm trained in molecular pathology. Probably I've had a lab for some. Probably about 10 years ago, I said no, we're going to be genomics, and we switched. And no, I don't know how to write one single layer of code. Okay, but I know what I want from the code. I tell myself, this is what we wanted to do. Make it do this. Okay, but yeah, all the trainees in my lab, they have to know R Python now, and be able to communicate through that. So any young person, high school, learn as much coding as possible. The entire world is going to, whether you decide to be a biological scientist, what you will not be able to escape coding, app building, anything. It's touching every industry that we have now. Big data is here to stay. So yes, learn R.
We've got some high schoolers on the beach. I was just wondering if you could break down a little bit. When you say data science, what does that mean to high school students?
Oh, that's good. So can they pull out the cell phone? Can they send a picture? Somebody had to write a code, right? That was be able to have that phone talk to another, go out into the cloud, capture that, make sure it's secure, send it through the cloud to be able to reach the other person's phone, right? Now, just imagine being able to use that same code to ask any other question you want in science, computer security, whatever you decide you want to do all facets of life. That's data science, right? Transfer of big, large data from one entity to another, or the security of that data in certain spaces out there in the what we call the cloud. Does that make sense? Don't be afraid to ask, right? So, um, I think, and I'm not saying I had this early on, right? Because in most parts, and you may not know this now, but I was a very shy kid. I was afraid to talk on the phone. I remember 16 years old, I wouldn't call somebody, to come out. My mother would say, people can't see you. They don't even know who you are. Why are you scared to talk on the phone, right? So very shy, very introverted, sort of personality. But if you want something, don't be afraid to ask someone for it. And you'll be surprised because what we do, I think as human beings, we say, that person's busy. I get it all the time. Say, well, Dr. Yates, she's busy. We don't want to bother you. Bother me. Bother me. Let me know who you are, right? Because I can tell you almost most successful people will see, if a person who's hungry will see themselves and know that someone helped them, they're definitely going to help you. Because someone helped you. Like we don't get to these places by ourselves, right? And so don't be afraid to walk up to anyone. I think one classic example is when I decided I wanted to research the biology of why African American men got disease more. There were actually no models available, right? So we use cell lines in the lab and stuff like that, right? And so when I started looking around, it's like all our cell lines were from European, Caucasian white men. It's like, if I really want to do this, I have to find some African American cells. So there was a guy named John Rim, and he was at Walter Reed at the time. So he had made the first African American cell line, and I found it online. It was some publications. So I need to find this guy. So I plotted to be at a meeting where I figured he was going to be at. And then I found his poster. He wasn't at his poster. I sat by that poster in Indian style, waiting on him to come back. Okay. All right. I was going to find this man. And then when I found him, I said, hey, I want to do this. I told him what my plan was. First of all, you also, if you want people to take you seriously, come with a plan. This is my plan. Come with a vision. All right. So I said, this is my vision. This is what I want to do. He said, okay, I'll help you. He actually just passed away this fall. He was 97. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, no, I have this African American cell line that you read about, but I have a whole lot more that I haven't characterized yet. You want to do it together? I said, yes. So I thought it was something. It turned into big more. That's actually one of the big emphasis of my career, because now those cells are used around the country. A lot of labs use them. And it's one of the things that I, was able to be known for contributing to science. And so again, just being not afraid to walk up to people if you want it, ask them for what you want. I guarantee the answer won't be what you think it is.
How's our time? I know we've got to get back to Yates. Okay. Yeah, what other questions?
What is the biggest
Don't look at me. I didn't do it.
You got all good questions. So I can honestly say that I'm having fun right now, right? So there's a period. Let's kind of go through the academic period. So there's a period in your career, particularly, it is a little stressful. Okay, so when you're in graduate school, particularly in a PhD part of, you have to discover something new. So it's like, okay, I gotta go do these experiments, and I'm looking for something. I gotta fit my thesis. That's stressful. So then you're in this no man land of postdoc era where you're like, I'm working, I'm gaining more skills. That's still not a real job. Okay. And then if you're lucky now to get a real job, you have Dr. Parker and I was talking about this earlier. You have 6 years. Okay. 6-7 years to kind of establish this career. Or you're like, okay, they're gonna tell you to find something else to do. Okay. And you have to get grants, you have to build a lab, you have to train students and so forth. You have to demonstrate your worthiness. Now, with the reward of that comes from a little bit of security. So a lot of academic institutions, and again, this is the difference between industry. After those 6 or 7 years of putting in that hard work, they offer you something called tenure. Okay, and this tenure means if you reasonably keep up your work, you have a job for life. You can't just not do anything, okay? But if you reasonably keep going, right, you have a reasonable amount of security where someone doesn't come in, the day and say, hey, you're laid off, or you don't have to be here anymore. That's quite different from industry, right? So we're going to contrast that. Industry jobs, and even right now, so 5 years ago, biotech was hot. I don't know if you guys see it. It was blowing up. Right now, biotech is laying off like in droves, right? So you go through these cycles. So they make more money, but this is more volatility, right? Academia is more Peter, but it's more stable, right? So when I had a family and I had taken my daughter, I chose the academic route. And then because of the stability, but I also chose the biotech part. So I think I have one foot in, one foot out. So the largest stressors, though, I think were early on, in career, the uncertainty. But as you sort of grow, they become less and less, and then you can start doing things more on your own terms. And I take that from my father. So I used to complain to him. I'm sure you guys all have to think about this. We were talking about before. I was like, well, Dad, if I go and do this doctorate degree, it's going to be this many years. It's going to be take this long. And he said, And he's a truck driver. My dad's a truck driver. He said, Karen and I talked about this last night. One thing he said, you're very fortunate because most people in the world go to work and they go to the job because somebody's paying. It's not what they want to do. They just need a job and that person's paying and they go there and do that. He said the second thing is whatever time it takes you to complete this training and go through whatever it is you have to go through, compare that to what you will have after you complete that with the rest of your life. And the comparison is not even close. That took all the stress away, right? Because then it made it worth it. So if it took 10 years, and now you think about it, you're young, but if you think about it, you're finishing training 35 and you're now going to work till you're 65, you have 30 years to enjoy that, right? So, these are the things that sort of, it is stressful. I ain't gonna lie, these are hard, really important careers. But if you keep perspective, and I think I've mentioned that before, who are you, your perspective, what do you want out of this? That sort of grounds it and makes it work.
I think you were mentioning about the pros and cons of going with academia and industry. What about for working in a hospital?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The research hospitals is a little bit more like, industry. Again, because the sort of academic sort of part of it where you get tenure and so forth. But I mean, if you're running a lab at a hospital, it's no different than at a basic site. So I'm at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. I run my lab just like it took you. It's the same senior structure. And then you get something, if you get really great, you're good and very, very lucky, you get something called an endowment. That's money for life. It's really good. The first advisor I think I got lucky on was Tim Turner, the one that you think I mentioned many times before. Now, after that, I took his advice to who was next. So if you have, and this is the first thing I tell young people, get a good mentoring team and then listen to them, you know. So Tim then advised me of the guy in Pittsburgh, Alan Wells, who to go to. And then Tim also advised me to go to Leland Chung. And then, so therefore you go back to your mentoring team, to ask for advice of who you should connect with, where if you need certain things. And so I think that's been for me. It's just been utilizing my network and the team of people that I trust. You gotta get some people you trust, right? But if you find some people you trust, and they don't have to be in your area, that's the other thing. Like there's so many parts of our life that we need mentoring on. They could be family. They could be. I have people for family issues. I got people, mentoring me for my science career. Like I said, we're doing this company and business stuff. An executive part. I asked another biotech executive, hey, I'm got this company. We're now licensed this drug. Can you help mentor me through this process? It's now me. I asked him just a couple weeks ago. No problem, Clayton. I'll be happy to. You need to be on a couple more SA scientific advisory boards. Let me get you on them. Right? Boom. So, it just goes and it just happens. And again, and not being afraid to approach people and tell them exactly what you want. And then it just kind of goes from there.
So, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of things. We got a lot of different folks. We've got high school, we've got graduate school. That's a great breadth of folks that you're speaking to right now. You would say three things, piece of advice. You almost have started seven. One of them, asking for help. What's your take home message for these students?
Two things I think is really important. One, try to create a plan for yourself, but you don't have to be married to it. Okay, the plans can change. That's okay. Okay, things happen all the time. They change, but people can't help you unless you have a plan or you articulate it. And I'm also big about the universe. I put it out there in the world, and if you put it out there in the world, then the world responds. Right? So if you don't articulate and it's all jumping in your head, no one can help you. Okay, even if it changes. The second thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. And then when you get the help, you'll know what's real, right? Listen to them. That's what I have.
Look, I mean, it may seem simple, but man, put it out there, right? And I think that's a really important thing. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Yates, it's been just an honor to hear you just talk openly about your life, about your career. We want to thank you so much on behalf of the Meharry Vanderbilt Alliance. We're so grateful that you're here. I definitely want to make sure that you all who are here in person know that you have been blessed, right? You here who are online watching, we are grateful that you had a chance to kind of connect. Mike, thank you so much. Thank you to Pencil. Really happy to have you all kind of join us virtually. Dr. Park, we're so thrilled that you're here as well. There's so much connection in terms of what both of you are doing, but I think leadership speaks volumes when they show up. All right, you heard Dr. Yates say that. Just because you're in the lab or not in the lab, right? As the case may be.
I check on them.
Yeah. I'm with you. But yeah, we can show up and be present. So thank you for that example. Just by the way, we're really grateful to have you here. We are these little what are those little ponchos? Since it's raining outside, those little blue balls that are out there, they're actually little rain ponchos. Feel free to grab one for you folks that are here. We'd love to stay in contact with you. So everyone who's here, just know when Dr. Park says reach out, he means it.
I do.
When I say reach out, I mean it. When Dr. Yates says reach out, he means it. So please do not let this be the last time we hear from you, that we see you. We're really excited to really build this community together. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Yates.
Thank you. Thank you.